Hello, BookTube. It's time for another video. Another selection of books from an area of my interest. Some of them I might have uh, discussed already briefly, but I can't be sure. I know a couple I have put on Instagram in the past, but we'll take maybe a little closer look at them. And this is from sort of my transportation um, sort of section of England. And we'll start out with some steam. So it's sort of like the romance of days of yore, I guess you would say, and some ways of travel and for machines that has long since disappeared for the most part. The first one is a book here. It's got a nice jacket, and I like the way the spine. It would be nice if it was a total wraparound, but it's David and Charles, a publisher I do like. This one is The Golden Years of the Clyde Steamers, 1889 to 1914, by Alan J. S. Patterson. David and Charles, as I say, New Abbott, 1969. And nice frontispiece of the Glen Sannox in Lamish Bay. There's a lot of photographs as well as some drawings throughout. We'll just probably the easiest just to read from the flap here. The 1890s were a remarkable and colourful period of Scottish transport history. The Scottish railways, unable to live at peace with each other, broke in upon the Firth of Clyde, poured money into new rail heads and fleets of steamers, and inaugurated an era of flamboyant competition which even today is remembered with awe. They provided incredible lavish services for the Glaswegian. They competed to the point of peril for coasting traffic, and they established a tradition of service and comfort second to none in British coastal waters. This book tells of the railways' invasion of the coastal services and of their fleets, which included such famous ships as David McBrain's beautiful Columbia and Iona, the turbine companies King Edward, and railway vessels such as the Southwestern Glen Sannox, the Caledonian Duchess, and the North British Waverley and her sisters. Drawing extensively on contemporary records and at times on the rich fund of humor with which problems were faced, much also is told of the social problems of the period as they affected the Clyde steamers and of the tragedies that unfortunately were rare occurrences on the Firth. I like the line here where it says, we're unable to live at peace with each other, the railway companies. So it just goes through, and it talks about all the competition for it, and where they actually didn't even make any money, but it was just to try to blacken the competition and put them out of business, and how much money they could go. And there's fascinating. A lot of these books have fascinating appendices, and let's just look at a few here. Now here's it's got the steamship companies. It's got, like, by year how much money they made for a couple of years. It's quite neat. But then it goes even more detailed. It just sort of ratchets down into like 1893 and 92, the like specific boats, and how much they made, like the receipts, how many tickets they sold, and how much they actually expended, how much it actually cost them to run. Like in 1893, the Duchess of Hamilton, they sold receipt wise £3,998, but it cost them to run £9,099. So they're running at a loss of £5,101. And in 1892, that was 93 and 92, it was even worse. The year before, they were running at a loss of almost 7,000 pounds, which even today is like, it's nothing to sneeze at. But then I don't know what the uh, translation would be to modern days. But yeah, and then there's and yeah, this is kind of neat too. Like for 1892, the Duchess of Hamilton, and it tells how many days the ship actually ran, which was 139, and number of miles it covered was 17,009. It took 42,757 railway passengers on board. Number of passengers carried locally was 24,538, and the total passengers was 67,295. And then it's got average earnings per mile. So that was 3 shillings 8 3/4 pence. Working expenses cost per mile was six shillings 9 pence. So it's almost doubled. It cost twice as much to actually run than they were actually than they actually earned. And that's all explained in the text, and how it was sort of the competition and trying to squash everybody. But then it goes into other ones. These are the ones I find most fascinating. I've got other books that are similar with Thames boats and stuff like that. Thames shipping, which I find a lot more interesting. It'll name that it basically goes through every boat that was that was made and used, and they'll give the name, and they'll give like when it was built, and when it was broke up or sunk, or how it sunk. Did it burn? Did it whatever? And it gives the builders, the engineers, the owners who owned it for the periods of times, the dimensions, boilers, what type of boilers it had, the machinery, and then other remarks for that. And it just goes through just page after page, which, like I say, it's sometimes just fascinating just to look through these. You can't even see it there, but I was just flipping the pages. It's just fascinating to go through these appendices. And as I say, I've found the Thames ones more interesting than I look at. I couldn't lay my hands on it now. But then here's the flags that were used. Obviously black and white, but there is a color code legend there for that. And a lot of final colors as well. So anybody who's a geek on that kind of thing, but it is like the stats are interesting to look at those appendices, because you just see, like, you spend twice as much just to run than you're making. But now we get into other steam powered vehicles. Century of Traction Engines, W.J. Hughes, and this may be one that I've either showed on the channel or definitely on Instagram as a photograph. This is David and Charles again. And it says Century of Traction Engines, being a historical account of the rise and decline of an industry whose benefits to mankind were and are incalculable. David and Charles didn't have it. Excuse me. 1968, originally 59, 68, and then this is the third impression, and the flap says, "Here's the third impression of a standard work which quickly earned an international reputation after its first publication. This is the story of what is possibly the most fascinating of all prime movers: the traction engine, the steam plow, the road locomotive, the steam tractor, and the steam roller have been of inestimable value to mankind in agriculture, in road making, and road haulage. In opening up and developing virgin lands, steam power played a part which was of paramount importance to the world." and it goes through, and here's like a highway locomotive. Lots of drawings, highway locomotive, and just yeah, all sorts of drawings, and it's quite fascinating. The doesn't have appendices like the other one, as detailed. I don't think there's any appendices in this one. There is a bibliography, a short bibliography, but yeah, just chock a block full of pictures, and they're just fascinating engines. I'm, I have no pretense of understanding fully how it all works. And that, well, I understand the concept, but it's just so intricate. And here's some more, ratcheting down into sort of, more specific is the Saga of the Steam Plow by Harold Bonnet. And again, it's a David and Charles book. And it says in the flap here, I've always been fascinated and inspired by steam engines of any kind, but more especially I have liked plowing engines, writes Mr. Bonnet. They seem superior to any other kind of traction engine. I had to write a book about them. His book is a detailed account of the way in which steam power has been used for land cultivation, and it describes the social and economic conditions which led to the development of the machine for this purpose. Though essentially a story with a British background, it includes the traces of a story in other parts of the world. But yeah, so it's a little off a little bit, but it just it's not sort of a travel thing. But I do have some stuff about farm tractors and things like that, especially steam tractors. It's a David and Charles. Um, 1965 originally, and this is 1972 new impression, and with a lot of these, they do it strays a little bit from England proper to other parts of the world, but that's fine. But the core of most of these are going to be um, British England. Here's something too. Again, I think I've showed it. It's the Golden Age of Tramways by Charles Capper, and that is Routledge, Keegan, Paul. And that was published in 1961 by, as I say, Routledge and Keegan Paul. And it says the street tramway was a harbinger of social change. It continued and developed the work begun by the suburban railway services in enabling workers to move easily and cheaply between industrialized areas and their homes in more pleasant surroundings. In the golden age of tramways, Charles Kapler outlines the origins of street tramways and their progress from horse traction to various types of mechanization, by steam, compressed air, and battery, electric power, and even by clockwork springs wound up at the termini by a steam engine. Eventually, electric traction conveyed by overhead wire or by a conductor rail below the road carried the day and led to a period of brisk development of tramways. However, the golden age prosperity was brief, and the motor bus and trolley bus, both nurtured and with difficulty by enthusiastic engineers and patent financiers, began to compete with tramway undertakings. And when their superiority became apparent, the decline of tramway set in until today. The British Isles can show only a vigorous system in Blackpool, a declining one in Glasgow, a summer-only horse tramway on the Isle of Man, and the rump of Grimsby and Immingham light railway. So yeah, so it's and this was again that I said it was 1961. So today I don't think any of those are in use anymore. But there are places they're still using electrical tramways or streetcars. Toronto, I believe, still has them, and a place that I lived before I came to England was Kitchener, and I understand they've put in streetcars, electric streetcars. So In some places, they are sort of coming back for whatever reason, but these are very different in many ways for that. Now we go back even further to Coaches. This is a lovely book. It's a bit rough. You can't really see too much on it. You can see what had been embossed, probably like the front cover, and it is about carriages. It's Carriages and Coaches: Their History and Their Evolution by Ralph Strauss, fully illustrated with reproductions from old prints and contemporary drawings and photographs. Published by Martin Secker, Adelphi, John Street, Adelphi, 1912. And it's interesting. You can't really see it there, but it's a review copy that's embossed on the title page. I've never actually looked to see. What does it say? It says, yeah, presentation copy for review. But I've never looked up to see if I can find a review. You can see it better almost on the back there, or it's a blind stamp. I find this fascinating because it goes through like all the different types of carriages pretty well. Just trying to find some interesting pictures here. There's some that are yeah. Well, anyway, it's just normal carriages, sort of the mail coach style, royal ones, more speed ones. Well, I actually should be showing these, I suppose. Just give me a second. Here's some more, the sort of Charles II sort of coach. It's more of a royal, early 18th century. The Darnley chariot, it's called a chariot for some reason. And the interesting thing is they got calling them modern carriages. The Coffin Cab and London Cab of 1823 with curtains drawn. So London Cab. And that's called the Coffin Cab up at the top there. Yeah, so that's it's a bit rough for wear, but I bought this. It was interesting. I think it's the stamp somewhere. I thought that was. Can't really see. Thought it was stamp, but it's got a nice little catalog put in. You can see it's been tipped in, but it's different size of paper. It's just sort of been put in after. And it's Martin Secker books. Yeah, it's a bit of a catalog. And here's another one that's on Coaching Days and Coaching Ways by W. Outram Tristram. It's a reprint. It's a sort of a cheaper reprint. I think I might have a small version of this, but it doesn't have all the illustrations like this. And it's illustrated by Herbert Railton and Hugh Thompson, who Amy at the Dusty Bookshelf knows well. She's got a biography of him, and he was a fabulous illustrator. I'm trying to find something that I could definitely say was his, because he is distinctive. That could be his there, I think. But yeah, it's just illustrated, and it's basically exactly what it says. Coaching Days. It says exploring the great roads of England, whether in the lumbering six inside vehicles of the 17th century or in the light four inside fast coaches of the early 1800s, marked the meridian of road traveling. This book shows glimpses of social life which passed to and fro between London and provinces from the time when men began to travel up to the time when they began to arrive at places, but to travel no more. It shows our ancestors of all ages in all kinds of costumes, trunk horse, doublet and ruffles, sacks, periwigs, full bottom coats, beavers and top boots, busy at those nothings which make traveled life, eating, drinking, flirting, quarreling, delivering up their purses, grumbling over their bills, a motley crowd of kings, queens, statesmen, and highwaymen, generals, poets, wits, fine ladies, conspirators, and coachmen. Beautiful, illustrated in pictures whose worthies in all sorts of positions on the road and off it. So yeah, and it's published by Bracken Books. So yeah, it's one of those cheap printed for sort of the remainder type market. Originally, it was done in 1888. This is 1985, but as I say, it does include all the illustrations in which other ones I've seen doesn't. Just looking at a news thing. It says Weekly News, 1989, August 24th, 1989. Somebody's clipped out. It looks like it's a review of coaching. Yeah, the coaching art, Cambridge's Eagle Inn. And it's just so somebody put it in there because it's talking about the coaching art of the inn. Like in some way, because this to me is like interesting because the coaches are sort of, well, it's how they got to places, and they terminated usually at inns, which were sort of like gas stations along the way, or petrol stations along the way, and they'd stay the night. They'd get food and water for the horses. There'd be food for the passengers, just like stops along the highway now. We've got restaurants there. You get petrol. You could even there's hotels. There's places you can wash. Bathrooms or showers in some areas. But then we move on to other aspects of the road. Again, these are ones that I might have shown, but here's The Bridges of Britain by Eric Demare. This is my beloved Batsford's publication, 1954. And let's see here, there'll be a frontispiece on here if I can open it up. Yeah. Painting by Samuel Scott, the English Canaletto of part of Charles Labour's Westminster Bridge. At its completion in 1750, the bridge stood for only a century. The title page. Basically, yeah, it's just here's the original price. It says there 42 shillings net. The Bridges of Britain is surprisingly the first comprehensive survey of its subject ever to have appeared. Its author, an architect, a writer, and an exceptionally gifted photographer, has for long had an informed enthusiasm for bridges. In this book, he succeeds in giving a stimulating account of the history of bridge building in Britain. Anyone who reads it, or even looks through its many pictures, will develop a fresh and rewarding appreciation of what bridges mean in terms of human endeavor, technical development, and simple beauty. Mr. Demare's approach is historical. His book starts with that early type, the Clapper Bridge, of which Dartmoor Post Bridge is the best known surviving example. He writes of Anglo-Saxon bridges and of Roman bridges, of which only a few fragments now remain. From medieval times, the evidence is much more plentiful, and Mr. Demare is able to tell in detail of how the bridges of the Middle Ages were financed, built, and used. The chapel bridges, the military bridges, the house bridges, of which the most famous were Old London Bridge, and the many functional structures which still continue to use today. And it's just, it's all, there's photographs of existing bridges, quite elaborate for the size. Um, yeah, and with the bridges and then the details uh, that were used rather than just being completely utilitarian. There would be sort of some fancy little bits and pieces with it, and this nice reflective photograph of the bridge, more plain, not that ornamental, but still of interest, and similarly there. And it's just chock full of that kind of thing. Um, and then it even talks about bridges over canals and so forth. So it all dovetails in with things, because you got the road. Well, I even got stuff on the, not so much technical or engineering construction of the road, but other items that are about the road, the stories of the road, and yeah, the types of roads that was like the Roman road type, or even trackways of like starting with with horses and everything. And there's it's that kind of thing where it's sort of, the idea is to have sort of a smattering, because to get a detailed library of this, I need tens of thousands of books. But I just, it's sort of my interest to sort of see the evolution of roads, well, actually walkways first of all throughout England, trackways, and how they developed, and they're still even there today. Even driving down a highway or the M1 or these motorways in England here, which originally started out with just a little trackway tens of thousands of years ago, and they're still there or very nearby, or Roman roads. It's just all the way through. It's fascinating that if you delve into the history of not just Jason Aragon was talking about the flaneur and the psychogeography of walking around the cities, but be aware of the history and that of what there was underneath your feet, or what there used to be along the roads, the streets. But it's the same as going through a country and the motorways. There was different things, because you could be on the exact same spot where the road was, where people 10,000 years ago walked, and then then horse traveled, and then carriages, and then early motor cars, like all the way through. And there'd have carriages, there'd be inns along the way, possibly even the exact rest spots along the road where they are today. It all can be sort of traced. This is a lovely book. I really like this. I was sort of second read, and I sort of left it for some reason. It's Old London Bridge by Gordon Home, The Bodley Head. And the other one says it's like it doesn't get into the it shows how things were built, bridge was built, and so the financing. This goes into the real detailed. It's quite detailed of the building of London Bridge and all the changes it went through. And here's if I can show it even partially, a pull out. And it's just profusely illustrated. It talks about where there were shops, and then above the shops there was living quarters on the sides, and how it was financed, how it was kept up, the upkeep of it, all sorts of things. It just goes all the way through until it's basically demise. The old London Bridge. Trying to see what else to say. Yeah, it's just sort of that. It's where the political things, because it was for a time the only crossing across, foot crossing or horse crossing or carriage crossing across the Thames for some time, and so it was very important. Army stationed at one end to avoid invasion, all sorts of stuff. But anyway, I'll end it there. That was just a sample of sort of yesteryear, I suppose, roads, tramways, carriages, bridges, and some steam locomotives and engines. Anyway, we'll see you next time, BookTube. Thank you. Bye.